Welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we discuss this week's cybersecurity shenanigans. Today is October 14th, and that means it's still Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we're going to take things in a bit of a different direction for the next few episodes, and we are going to talk through the cybersecurity bell curve, which is a list of, 4 or 5 things that you can do that should reduce your attack surface from 98% of common attacks. It's not perfect, but it definitely helps against script kiddies in the world. Before we dive in, look below the video. If you're watching this on YouTube, you should see a subscribe button. Hopefully it's already gray because you're already subscribed, but if it's not, go ahead and subscribe, hit the bell icon, like, comment, share, all of those fun things that boost the algorithm. And let's go ahead and dive into the relevant news before we talk about knowing thyself.
All right, real
Matt,
quick,
I think
before we
you're on
kick into
mute.
the
Oh, there he
news,
is.
before we
What's
kick
up?
into the news, let's go ahead and show the bell curve graphic if we can, just so we can kind of talk through what is this bell curve of protection, right? So you have least privilege, multi-factor authentication, patch your stuff, right? Like these are fairly basic things, but Microsoft in the way they released this, now this is about a year old now, Dom, if I understand, something like
Creeping
that.
up on that, yeah.
But they basically said, listen, as long as you could do these things and these practices well, then you can reduce the risk of most cyber attacks by 98%, right? Almost reducing it down to a non-value. And so what we
Right.
want to do in this series, and it's actually the next 3, it's this one and the next 2, where we're going to talk about this in the lens of this bell curve and try to deep dive into each of the segments of it. But this show, we realized that you cannot be successful at the bell curve if you don't know what assets you have, if you don't know where your data is. And so we're going to get into this episode. We kindly and lovingly call this the Know Thyself episode today, right? So let's kick into some of those Know Thyself components. If you'll take us over to the news, please now, Danielle, that would be awesome. Yeah, so this one, it's interesting because what we're talking about is we tried to find things where a poor process on knowing thyself and having good processes to actually disable users can have a real impact. Well, here we find a fired credit union employee admit, quote unquote, I wiped 21 gigs of files from the company's shared drive in retaliation. Now imagine you're an MSP and you wake up to a call from your credit union and go, hey, they deleted stuff, we don't know what. We have no idea. Please restore all the stuff they deleted. Do you still have it? And so as this goes on to process, they basically had fired this person, but had not taken the appropriate steps to disable the accounts. And as you get into that, that is a failure in account management. That's a failure in Control 5 and CIS. And it is one of those things where it really does set the stage for, if you're not aware of how quickly you offboard people, if the process you follow when you offboard people and how that's structured, then you're going to fail like this, right? Like, Dom, what are your thoughts on this? How can people avoid this common problem as an MSP, the fired employee
Well,
retaliation?
this one's interesting too because they had an MSP, right? It's
Right.
constantly referenced, and I actually read the court docs on this one because I was curious, and it specifically says in public record in the docket that such and such credit union, and they've anonymized the credit union, which is pretty common in these cases, but such and such credit union reached out to their IT provider and said, hey, please disable this human's account. And then it goes on to specifically say, but they didn't do it. So
Mm-hmm.
they really called out the IT service provider on this one hard. So, they're paying
And this is a
attention, I
good
guess is
time.
what I would say to that.
Well, this is a good time to bring back the risk of that, right? Like, if nothing
Right.
else, let's say they're best friends with that credit union's owner. They've been doing their business 20 years. They're not likely to sue. But that credit union now goes to an insurance provider and says, hey, I had a claim. We had an insider threat. She destroyed data. We need to have a claim on this. And they file it. That subrogation, which subrogation in its basic term, and I'm summarizing, is Dom gets injured. I have a subrogable right to become Dom for the purpose of suing you for lost assets, meaning that insurance
Yep.
company can attempt to recover the lost money by suing that MSP for not doing what they should have done. So you have to have very good documentation as that MSP. You
Well,
have
in
to have
this
said,
case,
hey, yeah,
you have to remember this is an NCUA insured credit union. Part of what was deleted was mortgage loan applications, so you have the Consumer Finance Protection Authority getting involved most likely,
yeah,
um, and the NCUA and the Treasury, right? So like what you're getting into in a customer like this is something to consider,
true.
because this is bad. Like obviously there's something wrong that credit mortgage or mortgage applications were deleted. It went on in some other articles to talk about how people didn't get their houses. There should be a little
Oof.
redundancy to prevent that from being the case. But the point is the damage on this one is far reaching. Right now, you're talking about potential home loan applicants suing the credit union for losing their data. And
Right.
if you've ever applied for a mortgage, you know how much data is in those applications.
It's enough to be
literally everything I need to be you for the last 10 years, right? So
100%. Yeah.
it's a serious ramification here. So build those processes with your clients, right? Like in this particular case, it was testified in court that the IT service provider was notified. Were they? I don't know. But if you don't have a defined process that dictates whether or not you were notified, I can say I notified you all day long. You can't say otherwise because you didn't have the defined process, right? So
define that a little more, Dom. Let's bring that down to a little bit ELI 5 on that, because I think what you just said is gold, right?
But you got to write down like what does a customer do? Yeah, to tell me specifically what are the steps a customer takes to tell me they fired someone, right? And ideally, what steps do a customer take to tell me they're about to fire someone at 4:30 on Tuesday, right? That would be the most ideal, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes people get fired on the spot. So you need to have steps that you know you're going to receive, right? Like maybe it goes to someone's mobile device over a text if it's a fire on the spot kind of ticket that you know you're going to receive every single time with redundancy. And then you need to be able to show whether or not the customer followed that process. Because if the customer didn't follow that process, you have some argument room to say, well, they didn't notify me through the channels that we taught them on. We wrote down for them.
What's that concept, Dom? What's that concept called? That's defensibility, right? That's defensibility. Yeah. Building that aspect up and building that paper trail and building the proof that you do it this way every time. And when they don't do that, I tell them they have to do it this way. Builds a paper trail, and it also builds the attack surface as defined, right? If they can just willy-nilly say it anyway, well, I'm going to compromise their account and send a message to term, or there's things you could do that abuse that, and that's why you want that process. But I think we beat this one to death. Dom, if you want to carry us to that next news article and kind of dig into that one. But the key takeaway here is this one's all about know thyself.
Know thyself. So this one's all about knowing where your data is. So this is actually a pretty old one from January, but it stands to the point that you need to know where your data is. So if you remember, there was a whole just surge of insecure S3 buckets. It was like the news of the day every day. Such and such company had an insecure S3 bucket, and the nuclear codes were in there. Right. There's always it's always ridiculous too. I genuinely don't understand how this continued to be a thing. But it did. And I
think Toyota just had this same thing happen, right? Like last week or something. There was another incident of it. For 7 years, it was unsecured, as I recall.
And we're finally seeing it. Like I use AWS and I have S3 buckets, and it's actually very hard. I need to make public buckets for my purposes, like host images and stuff. But to that point, it's very hard now to make a S3 bucket publicly accessible. It's like 17 different clicks and confirming and all that jazz. It didn't used to be that way. But anyways, in this particular case, it says right there, right? An insecure AWS server. It's not a server, it's a service, whatever. Shows 3 terabytes in employee records, and it goes down. This was, it belonged to Securitas, who was obviously the security contractor for this particular airport or these airports. And essentially what happened is they just had a bunch of data up there. It was improperly secured. So it wasn't even hacked. It was accessed. Right.
It was just literally accessed.
Right. It was probably indexed on Google, if we're being honest.
Somebody's Google dorking for S3 buckets would be my supposition.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's about, hopefully they knew the data was there, but if you don't know where your data is, you need to figure that out. And then, the next step from there is making sure that S3 bucket doesn't have public read access turned on, right?
But as we take this into the lens of this know thyself, it really comes down to just knowing data equals here,
right?
Access equals public, right? As you start thinking about that, how many MSPs that are listening to this today, or tangential service providers or individual companies are listening, how many of you know every single place your data is, whether it's Dropbox or Rike or in Salesforce or in X ticket Y or this product Z, and then know who has access to it, like who has that deep of an understanding of where my data is and what accesses have been assigned to it. And I think as you start realizing this, it's probably very few. Even at the enterprise and even in the highly regulated scale, you just have high failure rates in this. And so, one of the things that I wanted to make this whole first show about before we kick over to this really cool thing that our live studios has put together is about knowing yourself. Because if you look at the lens of the bell curve and you have this apply MFA, on what?
Right.
Principles of least privilege. On what? Patch. On what? Right. And I think as you look at that we see these failures even in large companies. And I also want to say, take it with a grain of salt. It's really hard. And some of these things are not things you're going to fully succeed at. But if you can show due diligence and due care in trying to do it, you're going to be in a lot better position from a legal perspective, as well as from a respect of your client's perspective as you go forward with this growth kind of concept. So this is the Know Thyself episode. I know myself, and I know I'm losing my beard here soon. So we have put together a really, really cool video for y'all. It's going to run about 5 minutes, but it's hilarious. Please type in the chat, make jokes, laugh at me, laugh at anybody you want to on this. I want to say thank you personally to, Claire, our producer, and Nick Yardley, and everybody that participated, Lisa, in drawing in all of these resources and getting them to do this stupid thing on camera that you're about to watch. So let's cut over to that now, y'all. Thank you.
Myself, Carrie Richardson, my wife, and Matt Lee put this thing out into the world. And Carrie said, "Hey Matt, like you've got this beard, why don't you come on up to the barber and shave it off?" And Matt said, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm quite partial to my beard. It's kind of my thing. Cybermattlee, beard banter. It's in my logo." Carrie said, "Well, what about for money? Would you take it off for money?" And he said, "No, it's not a monetary thing. I'm not interested in shaving for money." And she said the magic words, which is, "What about for charity?"
I am now working towards driving cybersecurity for the masses. I'm also, unfortunately, going to be losing my beard very soon.
I'm very concerned about Matt Lee's future with losing his beard.
He's going to compensate for the lack of beard with even more conversation, which terrifies me.
Matt Lee looks like a guy who just walked out of a mountain after trying to forge a battle axe that's going to kill a dragon.
My question is whether or not hair is going to magically appear everywhere else, specifically on the top of his head.
I'm not sure he's going to lose his superpowers, but he's going to look like 12. I think it's going to be shocking, the baby face that's underneath that beard.
How long have I been growing this beard? It's been about 5 months now, I think, total. And I've grown quite attached to it.
So I actually haven't been clean shaven since 2008. My daughter, who's 13, has never seen me without a beard.
This is by far the longest I've ever let it go.
I think the last time I was clean shaven was probably 15 years ago.
I one time lost a bet, and I had to shave down to only a mustache, and I looked ridiculous.
I have a fiance and she can't wait for this thing to go away, but it was good for a good cause, so she agreed to take one for the team.
She understands it's for a good cause, so she will bear with it. But every time I shave, there's always this look of disappointment. I'll see you in a couple months when it's back.
Breaking news from the Pax8 Live newsroom: the anti-beard shave protesters are taking it to the streets. Despite the good vibes of raising cash for charitable causes, these chin garden enthusiasts are in living fear of the fallout of follicle follies. Please donate to the cause early and often, but be wary of facial hair fallout.
I'm not a ZZ Top fan, although I do get asked about that all the time.
I would prefer Van Halen over ZZ Top any day.
The two things that people always bring up are either ZZ Top or Duck Dynasty.
I am a ZZ Top fan, yes.
I definitely enjoy their amazing beards in general. I don't think I could ever get to that level.
How can you not be a fan of ZZ Top? I mean, if you're not, I just don't think you're very cultured, and you should really go check yourself.
A beard, you ask anyone on here, they're going to say, yeah, it's a beard. It's facial hair. It's not really a sacrifice, but it's reflective of that giving, putting others first mentality, which I think we could all learn from.
I picked the charities on purpose to be around cybersecurity and as much around diversity, in the sense that we do not solve this cybersecurity challenge with the pieces that we have on the board today.
Encouraging things like diversity and cybersecurity, I think, are really important. Cybersecurity is not just, it's different than a lot of other career fields. We need people that think differently about the problems, that are creative.
My charity is Hackers for Vets, which happens to be my charity.
The one that was the reason that I got involved was Hackers for Vets. So my father was in the Navy, retired Navy guy, so just kind of hit home for me.
With a young daughter myself, that already is pressing all the buttons on every piece of technology she can get, there's a very real possibility she'll enter this. I would like to have the same opportunities available to her that were made to me.
So I think, they did a great job in picking some very worthwhile charities, and honored to be able to assist in those.
Put others ahead of ourselves is something that I think the country could benefit from, especially in the turbulent environment that we live in today. Like it's a role model lesson, and I'm definitely trying to pay as much attention as I can to it.
Put yourself out there to be loyal to something else other than yourself, something bigger than you.
Yeah, this has been a blast, and they crushed it with that video. It's been so awesome, and it was really a fun surprise for me to hear what others said. Like, Cole, you're probably not wrong. I might actually double and or triple the speed at which I speak as a way to compensate for not having a beard weight on my chin, right? Like the just flyweight side situation. But
yeah,
also
or
want to touch
muscle
in.
efficiency.
Exactly, Dom. We're just trying to conduce less calories per. But Zach Littlefield asked, Matt, when was the last time you had no beard? So I had a goatee, and then before that, I had kind of a shaven face in about 2007 or so. Very similar to Vince Chrysler was the last time I actually saw my entire face. I would wager I've gathered more chins since then, if anybody's curious. I don't know if it'll be a baby face as much as mini baby faces, but that's okay. So before
I feel
we
like
kick
I'm going to
into
need
your mic-
sunglasses around you after 18 Nations.
You're not wrong. Like, I may get some self tanner just for this face during IT Nation.
Yes.
Like, I may have to have it yellow.
Probably.
And then
Well, you'll
brown,
be in
not-
Florida,
yeah.
so you just got to hit the beach for a while,
Whew, man, it'd be taking out lifeguards from there. It's worse than the sand. But anyways, anybody watching on YouTube, we are watching the comments now. So if you can comment on there, especially as Dom and I get into this, it'll help and we can answer any questions. But I want to make sure we frame this appropriately. When I'm talking about this bell curve, everything that Microsoft has talked about on this bell curve really comes back to a CIS control. And so Dom and I are going to do our best to stay very much in the bell curve, but I'm going to at least talk about what controls I think are applicable to making you successful with the remainder of the things they've pointed out in the bell curve. And I think it starts with know thyself. So today, Dom and I are going to take you through a fairly short conversation as a business impact analysis. So Dom, what control does a BIA tie to? Like, where would you put a BIA in controls in that family?
And 2.
Putting you on the spot. Number 2, 100%, right? It's going to be control 2. And it really does come down to knowing where your data is. Control 3 breaks right into data protection. But if you don't know where it is, then if you don't know where it is, then you're not going to be able to protect it. You're not going to be able to apply MFA. You're not going to be able to do principles of least privilege. You're not going to be able to do those things. And so essentially, let's just go through it. Control 2 says inventory and control of software assets. Have an asset list of where your data is, right? What software you're using. Actively manage, inventory track, and correct all software and applications on the network so that only authorized software is installed and can execute, and also so that only authorized software is found and unauthorized can be prevented from installation. But it also really kind of goes into saying, where is your data?
Oh, hold on, because we've been talking about a certain key point in there, right? One of the things you said was prevent unauthorized software from being installed. How do we do that? Yeah.
Ooh, application whitelisting. Where has that been heard of before? I think it might fall in the bell curve, if I understand.
Well, maybe even a simpler task would be to take away admin rights.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. You just got my heart all pitter patter, Dom. So 100%, right? And I think that goes back to a lot of security isn't a cost, or at least not directly. It's not a software that you have to have necessarily. It's a commitment to saying, what are my attack vectors? And in this case, it's simply disable local admin. And if they have to have admin, give them a separate local admin and have a process when they use it to determine what they did or something to that effect. But 100% right, Dom. So control 2 is know where your software is, and we're going to get into that. That's what the BIA exercise is going to be. We're going to take, thankfully, to Sheldon Phillips. Sheldon, if you're watching this, thank you so much. You and I built this with Nathan Taylor and a few other players about 3 years ago, but it's still so very valid, and you've expanded it. So we're going to share some screenshots from that. And if you want to get access to it, we can get it to you later if you follow up in the comments. But the other thing that we kind of want to talk about is control 1. When you start looking at the bell curve and you say, I'm going to patch, what are you going to patch? What hardware is accessing your system? What software is accessing your system? So you kind of get into this understanding where control 1 and control 2 really make up the know thyself clause of everything you can do. And it is the first rule in cybersecurity is first, comma space, know thyself. And I'm a fan of the Oxford comma. It makes me very happy in my heart. But, first, know thyself. So,
Right.
Dom, anything
So,
bad
and,
there?
and to point out, so control one is inventory and control of enterprise assets. And I think in a lot of traditional thinking, like my Surface right here is an enterprise asset, obviously, right? So is my device, right? It's my device, not Pax8's device, but it's got access to data. So it is an enterprise asset owned by the user, right? And at the same time, it has very little to do with hardware unless it happens to be a piece of hardware, right? VM and Azure, enterprise asset, right? We're going through this internally with some of the stuff we use in ProServe, making sure that we have all these things cataloged here at Pax8, because I'm a nerd and I'll definitely stand something up in a hurry when my security brain's not turned on and be like, oh crap, I forgot to put that in the register, right? Now what do we blame
somebody
the cat
in the
for?
chat, somebody asked in the chat, who is this behind me? This is the human being that puts up with me and all of my failures and all of my successes. She has not killed me, although she has cut me a few times. Babe, if you want to wave to the camera over there. It's my wife, Kat.
And she's going to put up with beardless Matt here in a few weeks.
I don't know how long.
That's a whole new
challenge.
Isolation. Oh, I see. Yeah. Me locked off
all
for
right,
a couple months.
So have you, Dom, when you were doing this before and you were working with your clients, one of the things we talk about is know thyself, first as the MSP, but then there's also that component of that for the end consuming businesses they support. So tell me what you have done from a BIA perspective, or have you used a BIA? What was your method of gathering? What software do you use? Where's your data? What assets do you have? Let's kind of start trying to chat through that a little bit, and then we'll do the BIA exercise.
Oh, back in the day, my BIA template was not this good, but it did exist. And it essentially internally gathered a list of all the applications and all the different things. And then we assigned a risk level to each thing, right? Like IT glue was like dangerous, super high risk. Hate that thing.
Should be.
Right.
Should be.
Because it's but maybe like SharePoint, which was mostly marketing stuff for us, it's like, it's a little lower risk. And you repeat that same process for clients and you talk to them, right? It has to be a conversation. You cannot deploy any tool and be like, oh, cool, these are all the things you're using. It's just not how it works. You can find a lot of it. You're not going to find all of it, because there's going to be a person in there that goes to drive.google.com and signs in with myfluffycat@gmail.com, and like all of your business's crap is in there, because it's like, oh, I can go home, work at this on Google Docs or whatever. I ran into that so much, right? So honestly, asking the question and also getting to not just your key stakeholders, not just your POCs, get your primary contacts, you get down into front lines, right? Team leads, managers, whatever the customer has, and say, hey, do you do anything that doesn't have to do with OneDrive or with, the P drive or whatever sort of approved data places? Not in a punitive fashion, but just say, hey, we're trying to get a grasp on this and make it better. Not only do you get an understanding of, your high school username at gmail.com definitely has a bunch of PII in it, but also you start to understand how that user works, and you start to be able to create the right solutions so that you're not encouraging them to use shadow IT. You're not forcing them from this Google Docs or personal OneDrive experience that they're used to into VPNing in the P drive, because that's what they're going to keep using their Google Docs. That's just what's going to happen. So now you can work with the customer to say, hey, your users get benefit out of this. Check out OneDrive and SharePoint Online and co-authoring and sort of the Google Docs like features you can get out of that.
Yeah. What's ironic about it is a hacker is someone who's cut in line in recess, right? Like if you've ever manipulated objects
100%.
around you to better yourself over someone else, you're a hacker, period. So you understand these people just want to get their job done. They're employees that care about your business. They care about succeeding. They care about winning. And when they're faced against an option that makes them feel like they're going to lose, they often hack the system and use shadow IT. So shadow IT in its own right, in my mind, isn't defined as a negative. It's defined as a problem with the way you've defined how you're going to do business. And I think to your point, Dom, not only can cybersecurity help you secure that, it can also help you be a business enabler to ensure that business processes are functioning in the way they had intended to. So I have a plan of how we're going to do this, Dom. I want to go through the BIA, and I'm going to, because I'm long-winded and you're not long-winded, I am going to ask you on each of these categories, what kind of an impact would it be for an MSP? We're going to put it in the lens of the MSP now. What kind of impact would it be if one of these systems were compromised, and what kind of priority you would give it as we walk through this? And we're going to play the game that you should play with your other technicians. If you're an MSP listening, that you should play with your other technicians, or that you should play with your people and say, what risk does this have to me? And have an understanding, right? Because your IT glue may have the TOTPs and the passwords. Then it's a bigger risk.
Right.
If it had just the
Right.
passwords, it might be a different situation. So just take this with a grain of salt of this is why it may be different for you. But Dom, we're going to play this game as if you are the CEO, CIO of an MSP, and I'm asking you this just like Sheldon. So let's go ahead and share the graphic for the first one of this page of assets that we have. And I'm going to pull it up on my screen just so I can see it a little bit better than that. And we'll walk through them. And so, Dom, I want to ask you on this first one that you see, if you can read it while I am loading this. What is bedrock data? So we're talking about integration systems here. Can you give our audience just a brief understanding of what this category kind of means?
Yeah, so this is integration across platforms. So Bedrock's a lesser well-known brand. We're using it here as an example, but like let's blow it up to different examples for everyone's understanding. So Microsoft Power Automate, Zapier, man, I had another one on the tip of my tongue and I completely forgot it. But those type of tools where I'm taking two things, gluing them together, either for the intent of causing some automation or ripping out some sort of data. So you can honestly stick like Power BI in this because you're probably using Zapier or Power Automate to get the data into it.
Sure.
So something
and in my
that connects
definition,
data across platforms.
That's exactly it. It's something that either connects, manipulates and connects, or some otherwise aggregates. And so I think you're exactly right. Power BI would fall in that. So let's give it a risk score. First that we have on this, if we'll bring the graphic back up for a sec, it says, okay, when did you last review it? So this needs to be a component of your BIA. And one of the things I realized as Claire slowly throws chalkboard erasers at me, we haven't said what a BIA is. So a BIA is a business impact analysis. And your intention is, at least initially, to say, how much would this hurt me? And what should I prioritize my efforts, right? The higher the hurt, the higher the prioritization. So we're going to go through this, but we've also added some columns, and this is from Sheldon of, does it have MFA? Is it on SSO? Does it have an API key? Am I asking? So you can get more context around the objects. If your first pass that you do as an MSP is only the name of the software and what it kind of does for you and what the impacts are and whether it has MFA, I probably would call that good enough. But just understand this is intending to get you a lot of that context. So Dom, what would you rank the risk of a compromise of your integrated data system as? And are there any kind of, depends answers to that, right? You know how this goes.
Yeah. So there's totally depends. So, but first, let me answer in the way that I use these tools. So personally, I used Power Automate or Flow at the time. It was connected to a lot. It could pull data out of ConnectWise. We didn't put it on IT Glue. That was very intentional. But we could pull data out of ConnectWise. We could pull data out of accounting and sort of start to merge that data. So I would give it a high risk, right? It's a lot of insight into what operations my business is going through the day to day. But if you're using Power Automate to gather a lead and put that lead in a spreadsheet, that's a very different risk profile than what I was using it for, right?
Great call.
So it could be medium, low risk in that scenario, right?
And I think API endpoints kind of goes into that same category if we go back to the graphics, so we won't beat that one to death. But let's move on to collaboration and communication systems, because as my final points on the integration systems, it really is about what you put in that. And so as you're doing integrations, think about that. Think about this middleware system having access to data in a very privileged way, in a very designed systemic way, and what that could have as an impact to you if that was compromised. And so if I was prioritizing it in between data systems and API endpoints, SSO, MFA, lots of factors, higher factors, right? You're going to start escalating that. But so I would put that, I would agree with you, Dom. So collaboration.
And don't take the scope that you use it for, right? Remember, if you make that connector, it's a connector. So if I break into your and I'm going to keep using Power Automate. It's just what I know. But if I break into your Power Automate account, I don't give a damn what flows you made before. I'm going to make new ones that do what I want, right? So I'm going to be like, hey, please go to IT Glue and loop through all the records and email them to me or whatever. Right. So think about the capability, not how you use it.
And where possible, restrict what it can access, which would be a type of principle of least privilege, right? So if you have the ability to say, no, Zapier, you can't query every field. You can only query the name field, and you can only query the how many tickets are open, and you can only, now you could start seeing a world where you've set restrictions so that even if it's compromised, it has the limited scope to kind of counter what Dom's point was, which is today the truth. You usually cannot or have not done that, and so you have to consider the largest scope it could touch as the way you would scale that from a risk. That's why I put it so high in the category. Yeah. So let's keep moving on this. What about comm systems? What do you think the posed risk of a communication system like Zoom and Teams and
another it defends,
you know, whatever? Yeah.
Like it does depend, right? I made a very conscious effort in my practice not to email like passwords or other secrets. However, in all practicality, I could not force end users not to email me stupid stuff, right? It's just what it is. I got a lot of passwords in an email. So as much as I used an ephemeral link and I made my people use an ephemeral link every time, they didn't. So I would say in most businesses, and certainly in mine, it was another high. But and this is why one of the things I liked about my BIA was I gave myself some wiggle room, if you will. So I would call a medium to high, and maybe because I was all about device compliance and things for these extra high risk apps. Right. Well, man, sometimes I need to check my email on maybe a more sketchy. It just is what it is, right? Yeah. So maybe I would still dial it down a bit, but it could be high risk. You could have a lot of junk in there. I've definitely seen CPAs email CSV files of hundreds of social security numbers through just Outlook, right? No MIP, none of it. Just here you go. Here's what you asked for. So high.
And that's where you have an argument for DLP, right? You have an argument for some of that data protection stuff that we're going to talk about. All right, let's carry on. So one of the things I want to call out is if you're watching this right now, and if you're not commenting, name some systems that you would find or whether you find them high or low as we go through this. So integration systems high, collaboration systems, communication systems in my mind is extremely high for a lot of reasons. Reputational, I can also attack you using those, right? I can communicate with your clients. I can give information to say, hey, do this, run this executable, delete this, whatever it may be. And so collab and comm systems, you know, they affect trust. And what I mean by that is I trust a message from Signal when Dom sends it to me. I trust a message from Teams when Dom sends it to me, just a smidge less. But the general populace trusts communications from trusted channels. They don't usually consider the impermanence of trust. So I put those very high. I think that brings us right into marketing platforms, right? If you have HubSpot or Salesforce or Infusionsoft or a CRM or DocuSign or Exclaimer, or you have a system that's doing BIMI like Valimail or Demarkly or Demartian, or, you know, if you're doing stuff like Facebook and, you know, Dom loves the TikTok, so maybe TikTok. But the point is, those are in the marketing. I'm sorry, bro. That ain't right. Guy. I don't even feel good in my heart, man. I don't even feel good. I had to do it though. But seriously, marketing, Dom, let's talk about what the risks are from a marketing perspective around data, and give our audience maybe an idea of what we should rank this from that risk perspective.
Yeah. I feel like I'm going to say it depends for everyone because it really does.
It's the security
but in general,
and
let's generalize
dilemma.
this. I know this was a medium for me. And it was a medium for me because where I'm still in the same place here in Colorado at the time. There were no real privacy laws, right?
Right.
So that was really what I was worried about on my marketing platforms. I'm gathering people's contact information. I'm using them for nurture campaigns and whatever else I'm doing. So the risk of that is obviously there is that reputational and that trust risk, but this is a big one. I didn't have this overarching privacy law that says I'm going to slap it in the face for every record I lose. Right. California had it at the time. So if I was marketing in California, my approach would have been different. So it's that other risk. And now we have it in Colorado, so it would be high. And if you're in the EU, it needs to be high, right? What is it, like 1% of your revenue? Like it's high. So for me, it was a medium. I think in today's
and you're referencing GDPR,
legal climate,
right?
It would be a high. I am referencing GDPR. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. But for me in today's climate, it would probably make it up to high because of the auxiliary risk of I lost that data. Now some sort of consumer protection agency is on me.
And for Claire, General Data Protection Regulation for GDPR, which is a European regulation,
a big one,
and it defines hard losses, hard numbers for you losing records, right? And it gets very
huge hard
very
numbers.
Punitive. Yeah, like 1%. It gets ridiculous. So marketing platforms, I would put also in my mind as a medium to and maybe even borderline a low based on your privacy conversation. And I would say the biggest thing you need to consider about that is I already trust my marketing data as somewhat public. I already trust most
Right.
of the content, the intellectual
Oh, that's a good
property in
point.
that is already being delivered.
Yeah.
And so I look at it from a public perspective, but to your point, the privacy implications make it in the medium range, right? In that kind of conversation. So if I was focusing and I was trying to figure out which platforms to secure first, I would certainly tackle the ones that deal with my identity and my trust and my integration of data first before I start tackling this public data that I already consider public in some way.
Did we cover social accounts yet? Because this is a big one, and I actually ran into it 3 different times
let's
with
tackle
3
it
different
separate.
customers. Okay,
It's
'cause
considered
it is
marketing, so yeah, we'll consider that. Let's
so they
tackle
were
it. Go
low
ahead.
for me because I look like a doofus if someone goes on my company's brand page and posts dumb stuff, right? Sure.
Yeah,
but
we already kind of do that.
No
as
PII.
humans, Dom.
That's fair. That's fair. No PII, right? No specific identifiable contact information except for who likes the page, which is public anyways. So social media accounts for me were low. Now, this is where I found it interesting because I had customers experience compromises on
Great for
all
spear
3
phishing
all,
attacks, though.
all 3 times they were Facebook. Yeah. So what they did is this was insert trustworthy CPA public speaker guy here, compromised Facebook account. What does he do? Starts chatting with executives. Hey, I'm going to help you with financial stuff. Your business is going to be great. So for that customer who is a public persona, and now like me and you as people who talk publicly constantly, that would go up for me, right? Because I don't want my name being drugged through the sand saying I'm going to make all your financial wishes come true or your cyber wishes come true or whatever. So that's another one that like you really got to think about it. And unfortunately, there's no specific business login on any social platform. It's I log in with DomKirby and I can manage, my company pages.
So Nick Yardley, I think, is actually trying to drag me into giving up some OPSEC information because this is my dog Dame. Damers, come here. Oh, she's sleeping. That's my dog Dame. Yep.
He's sitting there answering security questions right now on the other side of the.
Well, but the point is, I don't use Dame as any part of my recoveries of passwords or for part of my passwords or for any of that. So good luck on you on the attack.
My first pet's name is 128 characters long, and it's completely random. Fun fact.
Did you generate
real
it
pain
LastPass?
when I was trying to yell at him? Like it was,
You should fish in a smiley face. You're yelling at smiley face. Oh, it's fantastic. But yeah, that's my dog Dame. She travels with me a good portion of the time whenever it's within driving distance for my aforementioned lovely wife back there, where she joins me on the road to keep it feeling like I'm not gone 2 million days a year. But yeah, good call out. Thanks, Yardley. Appreciate you, bud, in the YouTube chat. So again, participate in the chat. I'd love to have you add some context to this show. We're going to make this part of the element of these live conversations. So Claire, and
don't be afraid to mention products. We're not bashing anyone here. So if you're thinking about this and you use IT Glue and you want to throw it out there, we're not bashing anyone here.
Yeah, I'd love to see what you're using.
Taking any product you've got and trying to give it a risk. Yeah.
All right, now let's get into one that should be really tough, and it should never have a depends on this, I bet. What about accounting and financial? And to make people aware of what I'm talking about in these categories, let's share that. But QuickBooks, Peachtree, Sage 50, God bless their heart, Microsoft BI, BrightGauge, DocuSign, Adobe Sign.
So,
right. Yeah.
So this one, for me, always high every single time. But again,
no depends.
There shouldn't be a depends. I've met people who I've perhaps worked with who would say depends and be like, oh, it's just my financials. I don't care. And it blows my mind. Like, I don't care if people know how much money I make. And that's really not the point. There's a ton of PII unanimously in every accounting package. If you're pulling data into BI, it's got access to all of it.
Sales tax
or Adobe Sign or whatever is probably like customer contracts and NDAs and high every time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of the top ones. And I would say this is one of those candidates where as much as possible, if I'm dealing with these, and sometimes we have to stand up and say, it's not okay, QuickBooks. You need to have SSO. You need to have, and I just dealt with this in an incident today where you have to go gather logs from all these other independent systems. When if you had tied that to single sign-on, your triage goes to that from a did they sign in or not. It becomes one monolithic log. And so,
well, and let's go back to our news story, right? Fired person, account not disabled, etc. It's a lot easier to disable an account when I don't have to do it in Microsoft and I don't know Intuit or Xero and this, that, and Bedrock and room for failure is huge in those workflows, right? So back to our news story. Yeah, one place.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, good call out. And I think the point is that we're going to start seeing that when you talk about single sign-on and MFA, it's easier to apply MFA universally and also with less business interruption for your users. They're able to just do it if you have it tied at the SSO, at the identity provider. And for SSO,
even fancier.
single sign-on. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. We're getting even fancier though.
We were going to teach
Break
them.
out the FIDO key.
Oh,
I just
that's
plug this
seed
bad
did just
boy in
one
and
up
I'm
me.
good to go for the
Yeah.
day. Like,
Could you zoom in so I can see that serial number and that seed value if you have it written on there? I'd really. Oh wait, that's not how FIDO works.
I can't even read it.
Yeah.
You know, actually, total like ADHD moment. So something happened with a USB port on my computer, and it almost melted. You can't see it in the camera. Almost melted my YubiKey. I got to get a new YubiKey. Like it's cracked, and I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But I grabbed my YubiKey and burnt my finger. So
that's not
that
good.
was cool. It still works,
Yeah.
but like I
It's a
definitely
new
gotta
form
replace
of
that one soon.
cryptographic heat shredding is what that term is.
Well, you know, my fingerprints are useless now, so it's great.
At least you didn't grab it when it was hot enough to burn them off. You know, that's a positive. But I think if we're talking about financial data, I would want to put financial data as quickly as possible to my SSO layer so that at least the implications of me releasing contracts and NDAs and maybe intellectual property or bills or, you know, FCI. I mean, if you start looking in the federal contracting information might be in those systems. And so you start getting into where that can be a big part of CUI and a big part of FCI and usually in those financial packages and in those DocuSigns and those delivery mechanisms, things like that. But this category I would place extremely high and I would try to tackle it. So, all right, let's keep going on. Now we got to look at the operations and delivery of your MSP services. So far we've really been talking about
Wait,
data,
hold on, because we were in the same category. Hold on. So
Okay.
CRM solutions. Brian Wheeler drops CRM solutions, and I put them real close to financials.
Oh, yes.
Because they usually talk to each other like we drive the money through the CRM. So same thing. Hi, I've got customer lists. I've got what they're interested in, their purchases. If I'm like one of those sellers, and I was, that wants to know about people, you know, I know their wife's name and when their birthday is, so I can ask like relevant questions when I call them.
Yeah.
CRM. Hi.
That's a lot of
Sorry,
identifiable
it was a good
information
one.
and a lot of attack surface. And actually, I want to call out Brian Wheeler is somebody that I trust with my entire professional career. I worked with him side by side for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, in a couple of different capacitances, but brilliant gentleman. And he's 100% right. If I had your CRM, I could destroy the people because you have so much you know about them. Their dog's name is Dame. Their wife's name's Cat. Like, oh, wait.
Well, just competitive espionage. I see what you did there. Well, just competitive espionage, right? Like I could steal your sales pipeline and your prospect list and go sell that, and like it is what it is. Like a competitor is going to be real interested in that data.
Yeah, true story. It's very valuable, right? And it's why we make people put as salespeople all the data in their CRM.
Yeah,
all the stuff. So you can track ops, you can track information. Have they talked to them? What's their last touch point? What do they prefer to be called on? Do they have kids they take to school at 3 p.m.? Should we? Like, there's a lot of OPSEC information that can be gathered in those contexts. So, Brian, you get like the gold star.
Nice
if
job.
We're keeping points, Dom and I have earned 0 points. You've earned 1 point. You're not even on the show. You suck. So that's great. We'll have to have you on sometime. It's okay. All right. So let's continue on with the categories. I want to get through it. And the reason for this, we're going to have a call to action at the end of this for you listening and watching, but it's really going to be around, I think you can guess, doing this yourself and having this list of your assets. But what about security operations delivery? I'm going to go through a few of these categories so we can just kind of talk about it, but and then we'll kind of come back to the category. But I want to run through them real quick. So you have to think about systems like your SOC or a SOC as a service, right? If you're using something like Nova Coast or Pillar now, I apologize, or Rocket Cyber. Domain registration systems, like where are the actual root domains? I'm going to destroy you if I can gain access to those. What about DNS systems? How do you manage your client's DNS? Is that in your hands? What kind of risk do you create for that? What about your own DNS as well?
Sec.
Yeah, how DNSSEC. Like Dom and I have been on a rampage lately about checking people's DNSSEC. It forced me to move registrars because GoDaddy couldn't support what I needed. Cloud systems monitoring and documentation, right? Like think about that. It's kind of a data connector, but it's also a visibility engine and an action engine like LionGuard or something like that. Network monitoring like Logic Monitor or Auvik or something that, or Domotes. Security phishing education, dark web ID, Bullfish, right? Those kind of systems. EDR, AV, SentinelOne, Cylance, Sophos, CrowdStrike, Windows Defender, WebRoot, right? Those things. What about dark web and identity scanning, right? Identity systems themselves as an extensibility, like Microsoft, Okta, OneLogin, Duo for two-factor, MFA, Okta, OneLogin, Microsoft, vulnerability and premise reporting like Rapid-Fire Tools or Qualys. Or you start seeing that as you dig into each of these, I think there's a very obvious high category. Dom, any thoughts to add on this one before we beat this to death? But
also,
security,
there's some fun ones in there. We talked about Pillar, and this is not picking on Pillar. This is a risk with any SOC as a service and SOC as Security Operations Center.
As a service for the I could carry that one for you. So
There's a hypothetical in there that like, what does that vendor do to protect from phone call scams? Like the whole lapsus approach of I'm literally going to call you and try to trick you into doing things, right? There's that risk because Pillar provides a human service and Rocket Cyber and all of them. Again, I'm not picking on anyone. Do they have protections, or is there some procedure in place for me to authenticate that I'm Dom when I call and I need something from a person there?
yeah.
Right. So that's another thing to consider with these vendors that provide like human-based services. What's the human security element there?
We did that, Dom. I mean, that was one of the things where we put in separate factor authentication when I was calling in as a human to validate that I was myself. And you should have that with your clients too. This is a bit of a takeaway that's really, really, really imperative is if your client calls in, if I manipulate you by saying, I call my help desk, Claire answers, and I go, hey, Claire, this is DomKirby. I am actually part of Curb. I almost had it in my head, but I'm actually part of the whatever it was, MSP. Can you reset my password for my SentinelOne console? I can't get in. That has real social engineering attack vectors, right, that exist. And Claire would respond back and go, okay, what's your PIN code? Ooh, crap. Is it Dame? Hopefully it's not Dame, right? So the point is you can have those type of things. And I worked that out with my SOCAS when I was doing this back in the day, to where if we were going to make any altering of people on the accounts, incident response paths, operational playbooks, any of that stuff, it had to be a validated human. It had to be someone on that list with validation methodologies that were sometimes out of band. They weren't able to be done in a normal way. For MSPs out there, Kelvin, that is with CyberDrain, wrote a really cool tool that runs as an Azure workspace and actually sends a MFA to anybody with Microsoft MFA to validate that user by simply typing in their email address, and then it does the validation, comes back and says, yes, they validated. Free tool that you can use that works that way and helps you establish
that. I love Kelvin
that.
so much.
Oh, I do too, man.
Just hey, this is a problem. Let me solve it for the whole world real quick. No big deal.
I'm going to hug him, like big old bear hug. It's going to be ugly. I'm going to see him at IOTSA here in a little while. But no, it's fantastic call out, though, is that you should be validating those. And especially when it has higher sensitivity, like a SOC as a service.
And that doesn't have to be hard for you as an MSP. Like it could literally be a field and connect-wise on the contact. Like this isn't necessarily out of band, but maybe we're doing the right thing to secure a PSA, right?
Yep.
That's just a field, like the code word or the PIN number or the it doesn't have. The push thing is amazing, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't. You don't have to go that far right away. Just literally a field, or maybe you have their cell phone number, right? And you're just like, hey, give me the last for your cell phone. Like start.
Here's a tangential benefit. I agree with Dom. Dom is channeling his inner Phyllis Lee, who says, listen, I'd rather have people use text-based MFA than no MFA.
I need a shirt. Inner Phyllis Lee.
Yeah, inner Phyllis Lee, and we'll just get her picture, right? Yeah. But it essentially says, listen, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. That said, let me play out this strategy a little bit. So I use this MFA thing with Microsoft to validate my clients. And I have these clients. I know none of you out there have these clients, but that go, I don't want MFA. Actually, I know that you have this problem because Microsoft still says only 26% of tenants have MFA enabled right now. So if you look at that, there's a lot of people that don't. But you could say to your client, I would love to protect you from these type of social engineering attacks, but I cannot. Why not? We utilize the Microsoft MFA PACE, and you are not using it because you've decided not to do that. That's just one more thing. I want you to be aware of that risk. I won't be validating your users other than a PIN code that's easily guessable. It's not often changed, or it's used all the time, and it comes right. And so you get into this world where using that as a strategy to drive the understanding of the risk and who owns that risk, right? And making sure that they're saying, listen, I'm going to validate people. Mine's going to be a better process with people that follow MFA than the ones that don't. And we'll still have a process, to Dom's point, for those that don't.
Right.
But great segue, I think, right, that we kind of just jumped onto. But yeah, let's get back to the rest of the categories just so we can make sure we make our time. But the other side we get into is MFA for physical stuff. Now, this kind of touches on the insurance shot heard around the world from travelers with switches needing MFA. Like switches or stitches, boys. Right? So firewalls like SonicWall, FortiGate, WatchGuard, Dell switches, Cisco switches, out-of-box, out-of-band infrastructure. Like how do you secure your lights out management and your iDRACs on Dell, on your servers, DVR systems? Like they're the bane of my existence. Like I don't think there's any trashier IoT than DVR systems. Like not to beat them up too much, but I think that's an accurate level of beating.
Firmware written in 2008.
Yeah. I just cracked into a card key system with my fob by copying someone, but here at there was an escape room doing the same thing. So entry access systems, what do those tie into? Badging, HVAC. So where would you put that physical control perspective? And I'll give my kind of depends is that It depends on the threat actor after you, right? And I think
Yes.
that's the piece.
Ooh,
If someone's
okay.
going to, yeah. So let's take that as our start. Go ahead, Dom. Where do you put
That's
it?
such a hard topic, guys. It's a hard topic. But let's do a simple depends exercise. Is there data in there? Right? If whatever's behind said door, like we'll start with like the truly physical space.
Right.
What's behind that door? If you're a doctor's office, right? And you've got that old, like those fancy, like library things, you know what I'm talking about? You scoot over and
Yep.
it's got every patient
That you
file
can
since
roll and the whole thing
1864.
slid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
If you've got that, like that door needs to be secured, and HIPAA says you need to know who accesses data when. So you probably need to look in access control and all that.
All
jazz.
right. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. I just want to go ahead and define HIPAA.
One P, not two P's. One P, two A's.
Yeah, one P, two A's.
One P, two A's. Right.
But you're right. There's data. Which, back to a tangent though, I always wanted to like screw one of those cabinets shut with someone stuck in there. Like I was just always curious to see what that would look like. Is it going to be like fun?
Maybe zip tie
it.
Like...
Yeah, like you could make this really fun. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. Definitely a tangent.
Ultimate office hazing. But like let's pivot to this insurance shot heard around the world, because that is like internally, sure, do all the radius and all that jazz, and for clients, holy crap, is that hard. Like now imagine you find a way to do it. You're using the client's identity
using Port
system,
Knox, or you're doing something with VPN.
So you did all that, but then clients like, I really want to go work with that MSP over there. How the hell do you transition that?
Oh, bro.
Right. So that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I genuinely, like, assuming there's no remote management, which there shouldn't be. I genuinely am not a fan of the whole every switch needs MFA. Yep. Could I do some shady stuff on a switch? Yep. But if I configure the switch so that the management port is dedicated and not everything plugged into that switch can manage that switch, and it's not exposed to the internet, for me, and this is just my opinion, I've done a lot to mitigate that risk. So I'm not generally a fan of MFA on every piece of equipment. It's a lot, the operational overhead alone. Plus, to accomplish that, you're storing some sort of seed somewhere. It's the only way it's going to happen. So you're going back to the original problem. But for me, those are medium risk, right? Because if I do gain management access, I can create some havoc.
And this is where this becomes, risk isn't always static, right? Because if you have a threat actor that is concertedly after you, that is at a stage where they will exploit physical or access level risks and then want to land and expand and find out operational expansion, then it becomes a higher risk, right? In the sense that, that's the vector it's going to matter. And so I would put hardware and physical access and things tangential to a medium in my mind. I would say it's a medium in most cases. For the MSP, I'd probably put it as a high risk. And I would probably say that if your infrastructure also contains a lab tech or contains a self-hosted RMM or self-hosted infrastructure in any way or shape or form, or cloud hosted by self in that direction, you're still going to be in a position where that risk is high no matter what. Because if I want to attack you, I'm going to start by going to DNS Dumpster. I'm going to find your infrastructure. I'm going to go attack the infrastructure. And it's going to tie into how you've configured that infrastructure to give me layers of delay, right? To make it harder for me to achieve my objective. And so I think I'm with you on that. I would define most of those systems as being a medium, and I would therefore probably put them a little lower, other than where you are having to deal with it from an insurance perspective, which now creates a business risk that now puts it as a higher priority, right? And you have to say, listen,
because again, meeting that standard that was set by, I'm not going to name them, but that particular insurance company is
let's say it rhymes with Ravelers. We'll call it Ravelers Insurance.
It's just brutal. Like the ask is huge. Like I just want to be clear. I'm not telling you to go MFA switches, because holy crap, I can't imagine that overhead.
So this last one we're going to get into pretty quick is client delivery apps. And I want you to think about this as the things that have the highest risk period. And here's why I say this. You have what's called a fiduciary responsibility to your clients. Just like a CISO and a CEO have a fiduciary responsibility to the American public as a publicly traded company to be in care of their finances and in the data and things that are entrusted in it. And so I think when you start thinking about client delivery, like IT glue, you now have the map I want as a threat actor to destroy them. What about passwords? You now have the map I want as a threat actor to destroy them. What about MFA? You now have a map that as a threat actor I want to destroy them. And so you start getting into this where you've actually accepted more risk by taking on that data and it puts it in a higher category because you are now acting as a proxy for these humans with subrogable rights, companies with subrogable rights. You have insurance companies at play, you have regulatory at play, you have HIPAA, you have DHS, you have FBI, you have all these things coming into play that are going to start mattering more and more. And so I would actually put this last category in those client delivery systems as the highest. In fact, in my MSP, when I was doing this, we actually separated those two teams. The teams that delivered the identities, the MFA, the security layer were separate from all client delivery. There was a whole separate team. And those teams had no access to the identity layer, had no access to modify these things, had no access to modify PLLPs, had no access to principles of least privilege, but had no access to modify those things in a way that would have been, meaningful, at least the way we had always threat modeled it. I mean, there's definitely some surface area, but separating those and having an understanding of my client delivery systems are probably as high of a value of my identities, right? In my opinion.
Yes.
What are your
At
thoughts
least.
on this? Where do you place this one?
You hit the nail on the head. That's the scariest thing happening in an MSP, right? Like, of all the things I had in my MSP, I lost sleep over the RMM, especially when all these attacks started coming out. That is a dangerous piece of software. Again, it's a piece of software we might still need to do our job, but it's still dangerous. Like, we have to be honest with ourselves. It's a very dangerous piece of kit to have deployed across the customer base, and you have to treat it accordingly, right? And that can be hard with some of these tools. Again, I'm not picking on anyone because it's hard with most of these tools, except for some of the more like modern, new age ones that have done a better job out of the gate. The amount of tech debt in this space is just ridiculous. It's going to be hard to pay off, and the interest is huge. Like, we've seen the interest.
It's real,
and it's not just hardening how we access to it. Maybe limit what it does. Like, there was that whole series of Screen Connect incidents using the little script function to run PowerShell payloads. You can turn off the script function for everyone but the super admin or whatever the role's called. Do I need to run scripts from Screen Connect? Yeah, it's handy. I definitely used them, but is it worth it? Probably not. So also look at that. How can you dial down the capabilities of someone to exploit that particular piece of
And we're going to dig hard into all of these concepts. So we'll go ahead and get towards wrapping this up in the sense that everything we've been talking about, each of these categories, in some way will be represented in how do we apply principle of least privilege to this? How do we apply? And so we're going to take next week and the following week to go through each of the things in the bell curve and take all this that we just walked through and then give examples of what we might do to reduce risk and what we might do to enhance functionality and what we might do to make this more secure for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And so I'd love to welcome you all back next week for us, where we are going to be tackling some new things. Dom, what are we going to be doing next week? Let's get people clued in.
So, I totally forgot it, man. It's the end of the week. What's the next
week's
thing?
No worries. Next week, we're going to be doing principles of least privilege and MFA.
That's right.
So we're going to be talking about those as vital parts of reducing the cybersecurity bell curve of risk, right? We're going to be talking about those because they're right in the middle of the bell curve, the way Microsoft drew it. There are also two that happen to be at the very top of my heart of I want to validate you. So what is MFA? That's authentication. MFA is going, is that Dom? Is that Dom? Right? And then we're going to be getting into principles of least privilege, where we're going to discuss, should Dom have access to that? That's authorization. Exactly, Dom. See, we spend too much time together. We got to watch this. My wife's going to start asking questions. But 100%, it's authorization. So next week is authentication and authorization week. That's what we're going to be talking about. It's going to be fantastic. We really would love for you to join us. But also, Dom's got some closing things for us. And we need to ask you, please subscribe and like and all those fun things. And go ahead and close us out there, Dom.
Here's our challenge for you. So we're going to be giving you homework after our show.
Love it.
We just went through a BIA. We're not going to ask you to do a whole big spreadsheet. It's a lot to pull off in a week. Write down your top tools. Write them down and then give them a risk score, right? And then have some thoughts for yourself. We're not talking live with each other in this iteration. So have some thoughts for yourself. Why is that a high? Why is that a low, medium, whatever it is? Start to practice this exercise a little bit. Now, if you really want to get deep into this, shameless plug, we have resources for Pax8 Academy that Matt leads. So if you really want to get into this after this series of shows, he would love to drag you through this process and really make you think outside the box. So go ahead and write them down. I don't know. How about we say the top 5 tools? Doesn't have to be in Excel. You can write it on a sticky note. Don't care. But bring that list back with you. Top 5 tools in the risk level.
And as we talk about MFA, go ahead. Sorry, I get excited. But as we tackle MFA, write them down. and say, where should I
Yeah.
apply? What are my gaps? How can I apply principle of least privilege? What can I do to Zapier to make it only have access to these things? And so we're going to start approaching it with that lens. And as we talk about stuff that makes you go, oh, gotcha, write it down, go ahead and make it an action item. And what we're trying to do here is Cybersecurity Awareness Month comes and goes, and it very often has no impact. It's just a time we think about it. I don't give a crap about that. I want to turn this into action. And so I'm asking you to play along with me at home, and let's go through this month with these 4 dedicated sessions, and let's get to a point where you as an MSP have actions that come out of this. But that's all I've got for today. I'm super excited to see y'all back next week. I will be in Denver. It's going to be fantastic. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Please come back next week. We want to continue these exercises with you. This has been The Game on Pax8 Live. Pax8 Live has some new shows coming. I got to see some sneak peeks of them, and they're pretty sweet, so make sure you catch those too. You can catch those by clicking that subscribe button, clicking the bell icon, and we will see you next time.